Welcome to Sports Ophthalmology, a podcast for ophthalmologists and trainees interested in providing eye care to athletes. I am your host, Jared Tuttle. Join me as we hear from national leaders in this exciting subfield of ophthalmology. Dr. Rolando Toyos is a cataract and refractive surgeon in Memphis, Tennessee, and founder of the nationally acclaimed Toyos Clinic. Before medical school, Dr. Toyos was a high school teacher and basketball coach. He received his medical degree at the University of Illinois and completed ophthalmology residency at Northwestern University and Chicago Children's Hospital. Dr. Toyos is the inventor of the intense pulse light IPL procedure for dry eye disease. Dr. Toyos has worked with athletes in the NFL, NBA, MLB, and World Boxing Association, including close connections with the Memphis Grizzlies, Seattle Mariners, and Memphis Redbirds. Dr. Toyos has authored numerous books, including The Life and Times of the Sports Ophthalmologist. Dr. Toyos, it is an honor to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'd love to start off with hearing how you got started in sports ophthalmology.
So I'm going to take you way back and say that I've always been involved in sports. My dad came to this country from Cuba as a Cuban shortstop, playing in the minors for the Yankees. So I think I was born in the crib with a baseball and a glove in the crib. So it was always talking about sports, whether it was basketball, football, baseball, whatever sport was on. My dad and I would talk about it. So my early dreams when I was a kid is I would tell everybody, they'd say, what would you want to do? And I'd say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a pediatrician by day and be the Yankees shortstop by night. So once you're kind of with that background, you're always looking at sports, thinking about sports. And I initially thought that I would go into orthopedics. And I went and saw orthopedic surgery. And I go, this doesn't excite me. At the time, I was doing trauma research as a medical student, working on rats under a microscope. And I'd had to cannulate their femoral artery for this research study I was doing. So I always liked kind of that aspect of it, operating under a microscope. And my research mentor, after I got back from trying orthopedics and trying trauma surgery, he said, you're really good under the microscope. You should go and watch ophthalmology. And I knew nothing about it other than I would get my glasses from my optometrist at an early age. So I went and saw one surgery and I was hooked. So, with that, I started my own practice right out of residency. And before that, during my residency at Northwestern, we would wind up taking care of some of the athletes. We wound up doing cataract surgery on Michael Jordan's mom, which was very interesting. I thought, there's a whole, anytime that there was something with an athlete and their eye, whether they get hit in the eye or had some kind of problem, everybody kind of knew that I was a fanatic and I enjoyed sports. And so they would send them over to me. And so when I finished my residency, I didn't think, that I wasn't at Northwestern anymore. I started my own practice. I didn't think I'd have any kind of involvement. And then the Memphis Grizzlies came into town. And it just turned out that the GM went to my alma mater at Stanford and called me up and said, we need a team ophthalmologist. Are you interested? So I said, oh yeah, I'm definitely. I didn't know what it meant. I just raised my hand and said yes. I didn't know what it entailed, what I needed to do, or I knew there was team doctors at Northwestern, but I was never involved in that part of it. And so then I just jumped right in and found that there was really no information out there for a team ophthalmologist. There was nothing I could refer to. There was no books. There is no webcasts. There's no, there was absolutely nothing. So I was like, okay, I'm doing this, but I don't know what I'm doing. So, I really kind of made it up as I went along. I found out what the other team doctor was doing, which was not much before they moved from Vancouver over to Memphis. There was no real protocols. And what I realized is the orthopedic surgeons that were involved with the team, they had protocols set up. The internists had protocols set up, but there was nothing for ophthalmology. So I got with them and I said, well, tell me what you guys do. And they said, in the beginning of the year, we bring the team in and we do exams. And I go, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense. And how is ophthalmology being involved? Oh, yeah, they've never. We just call them when we need them. And I just thought, this is silly. We should really be involved in the whole process, just like those guys are. So when they did their pre-season exam, I set up an eye clinic. So I brought in their orthopedic clinic. I went in and I brought in our slit lamp and brought in everything, piece of technology that I thought we could fit in their little area and just put those guys through the paces. And what was shocking to me is you figure they had that all wrapped up because vision is so important to them competing, but it wasn't. You had some of the players were seeing best corrected 20. We had one. It's another story in itself, but we had some that could be corrected for 2020, but they've been playing their whole lives at 2060. So we had to have those conversations. Some that had history of glaucoma, and they were recording high pressures. The NBA is, I don't know what the breakdown is now, but at the time it was like 70% African American, so they're at a higher risk for glaucoma. Some of the players had prior injuries before to their eye that never really were followed up. So you're talking about somebody that may have had an angle recession and never followed up on it. And they come in and you do this preliminary exam and they got pressure of 28. So what do you do there? So there was a lot of different conversations that we had, and I thought to myself, God, this is very valuable to them, to the organization that we did this, and we just created a protocol, just like the internists and orthopedic surgeons that got written into the preseason exam, which was great.
Is that something that has become more commonplace in the NBA or maybe even in colleges now, having that sort of eye exam involvement?
So what I did after that and realized that there was a need there, I called some other ophthalmologists who were team ophthalmologists, and they were seeing the same thing. The other thing is that we didn't have an organization where other specialties did have organizations, especially orthopedics. So I got a group of them together at one of the academies, and we sat down and said, we need to create an organization and kind of write some of these things down. And also, the major thing why we need an organization is if an athlete has an eye problem and you do whatever with that patient and you really don't have any backup, other doctors saying, yeah, this is standard of care for this, and you're dealing with a $10 million a year athlete and somehow something doesn't go the right way, do you have a leg to stand on? Is there, you're going with standard of care of just a general patient, but what is the standard of care for an athlete? So I'll give you a perfect example. Player gets hit in the eye, has a traumatic iritis. You tell the patient he's got to sit around, let that inflammation clear before he can play again. Well, say it's the playoffs. He says, well, I'm not waiting, 3 days for this to clear. I'm not waiting a day. I'm playing tomorrow. I can walk, I can run. Doesn't matter if I can see. That's what they think. I'm going to play. So you're dealing with the team, you're dealing with the trainer for the team, you're dealing with the athlete, you're dealing with all these different things. And they can find another doctor that says, well, yeah, he can play. So where do you fit into that? Now, if you have an organization and we say, well, the Sports Ophthalmology Society of America says you should be sitting out until this time. So it's not just one person standing there in front of an organization really pushing for this player to play. So we didn't have that. So we got a group of doctors together and we formed that organization, and we just started getting more and more people involved. And then at every academy, we would go ahead and give presentations of interesting stuff and what we were doing and what we were seeing. And so kind of grew from there. And, that's why I'm glad to see people are interested again. So maybe they can revive this thing that was created years ago.
Yeah, what were some of the barriers that the Sports Ophthalmology Society of America faced?
The major barrier is time. I think because usually these teams will pick certain doctors, but usually those doctors are so in their own practice and what they're doing, or they pick a university doctor. Is like we're so busy doing our normal stuff, it's really hard to devote now more time to a team of 15 and an organization of maybe, because that's the thing, when you take on that role as the team ophthalmologist, it's the players, it's the visiting players when they come into town, but it's the whole organization starts calling on you. So when I took care of the Grizzlies, I wound up doing LASIK on a whole bunch of different people in the organization. Or, you would get a call, hey, this is the GM, I've got something in my eye, can I come see you? So, so you wind up taking care of more than just the players, you're taking care of the whole organization. So I would say time, because you're doing so many things. And I would tell people all the time, it's cool to devote that time to the team when they're winning and going to the playoffs. But what happens when the team is way out of the playoffs? They're having a miserable year. They're maybe last in their league, and you're still having to go to every game, and it's almost like a bummer to actually go and go to each game. So that thrill wears off a little bit, but devoting the time that is necessary to do that, and then the compensation doesn't equate with the time, and then the liability is another big thing. So before, it wasn't a big deal to be a doctor to a team, but after a couple of very high-profile lawsuits, mostly in the orthopedic world, but there have been in the eye world, is they raised your malpractice insurance if you were taking care of a team. So I had a very low malpractice premium. And then, 5 years into it, one day our premium jumps, and I'm like, well, we haven't had any problems. There's been no lawsuits. Why did our premium jump 5 times? And they said, well, because you're a team ophthalmologist for these teams, and that increases your liability. So what you started to see is a couple of orthopedic surgeons started to drop out of that taking care of a team, and same thing happened with a couple of the ophthalmologists because they didn't want all of that liability. But what's interesting now is now the NBA used to require teams to have a team ophthalmologist, but they don't do that anymore. They kind of eliminate it, which is a little bit scary because of the amount. There was a study showing the amount of injuries that happen to the eye during the course of the year, and I could tell you as a team ophthalmologist, it was probably once every 2 weeks there was something, either hit to the orbit, a scratch cornea. There was even a patient that was sent to me that had an optic nerve avulsion playing basketball. So there's a lot of different things that can happen, but they just kind of eliminated that position. So I don't know how the NBA handles it. I was already gone when they made that decision, but I don't think it's the right decision. They should probably still have a team ophthalmologist.
Do you feel like there is inherent value in having an ophthalmologist who is aware of that sport or who is involved in sports in some way? Do athletes really need a sports ophthalmologist, or will any board certified, hardworking, intelligent ophthalmologist be able to give them top-notch care?
So I think it's good to have some working knowledge in the mentality of an athlete, because then you'll understand the language, or the way they approach things a little bit differently. I also think if you're giving any kind of visual advice to help them with their sport, it helps to have some background in the sport. And I'll give you a perfect example. There was, and there still is, there's somebody always creating something. So there's doctors that always create these things and go, hey, we want athletes to go through an hour and a half of these visual skills a day to improve their sports vision. And I would always say to them, find me the athlete that's going to devote an hour and a half a day doing this thing that you've created. Not saying it's bad what you've created or it's wrong or whatever, but very hard to get them to sit still. So my theory was always to create things that see how they practice, see how they play, see what they do, and then build whatever vision aids that you create, build that into what they're already doing. That's the only way that they're going to sit down and do it. And you may get them to adopt it for 3 days or 4 days, but and then it just sits in the corner. So there was this is years ago, but somebody created this kind of video game thing for players, and they got it out to this baseball team that I was consulting for. And, they did it for maybe a day or two. And then it went from doing it for an hour to doing it for a couple minutes to it collecting dust in the corner. And it just didn't get used. But if you can understand their sport, even if, say, you don't have a background in the sport, I'd always do this. I'd show up to practices. So I showed up to basketball practices, football practices, baseball practices. And I just saw the drills and things that they were doing and try to figure out how vision plays into whatever they're trying to do and the skill they're trying to do, and then use my knowledge of vision to help them understand how they could make themselves better in that sport by using vision. So that's why we created that video vision in baseball with the Seattle Mariners, where we combine those two. These are drills you do. In the drills that you do, this is where vision plays into it. What is the visual concepts in you trying to hit a ball or pitch a ball or see a ball or throw a ball or do any of these things that you do with a ball? What are the visual concepts that you're using? And giving you that information, will that help you become a better hitter?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed. I was able to read your book, The Life and Times of a Sports Ophthalmologist.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was surprised by the, I don't know, the visual kind of aspects that you brought in. I know that like sports vision therapy is something that's brought up and slightly controversial, but the scientific principles that you explained really made sense. Like, for example, the like shooting a basketball using stereopsis within 15 feet of the hoop
Yeah.
versus further shots requiring monocular vision cues. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. And it played out because we had a lot of, you would be surprised, but we had a lot of monocular uh, basketball players playing in the NBA. And you're like, I mean, this shouldn't be this many. You figure maybe one in a generation, but having two or three on the team, you're like, how is this even possible? One, you know, we had a lot of, I talk about in the book about my one-eyed Jake, but we also had a lot of players that were 2100 or 2150 in one eye and 2020 in the other, and how do they adapt it to that, and how can you adapt to that? So it's and I talk about those situations in the book. That's why I think they never the general manager and the front office never thought, oh yeah, we need to get an ophthalmologist involved when we sign a player. And I talk about in the book where they wind up signing a player who's monocular and didn't even know it, no reports on it. So they already signed him, and they say, hey, we got a player. We're going to send him over you just, to get his preliminary vision exam. And I go, he can't see out of one eye. They're like, well, does that matter? And what I did with the coaches is I go, okay, well, I did this little test with them. I crumpled some paper with a garbage can. I said, okay, here you're gonna shoot with one eye from this distance, and then shoot from one eye at another distance, and then they realize, oh, this does make a difference on this player. So, but they'd already signed the contract. It's nothing they could have done about it or do about it. But then it became important for players to get not only screened by ortho and internal medicine, but to come by the office and have their vision checked.
What a great way to communicate that to the GM and coaches. I think that's great.
Yeah, it was very revealing to them. Again, they won't know the importance until you show them the importance.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about where you see the field of sports ophthalmology going. We've talked about the society having standards of care. Do you feel like getting collegiate eye screenings involved? I don't know, where do you see the field going?
Well, I think it goes all the way down. You don't have to be taking care of a professional team or even a major Division I college team. Even way down in the high school level. One of the things I talk about in the book, Life and Times of a Sports Ophthalmologist, was the concussion thing, and how eye doctors, and it doesn't necessarily have to be ophthalmologists too, it could be ophthalmologists and optometrists working on this. But the eye doctor can be very important when it comes to concussion in terms of reading pupillary reflex, and having pre-exams on their eyes, and helping a player throughout their career at a high school to make sure that there's no changes in that due to some type of injury or head injury or trauma or concussion. I still think that is, unless we develop better technologies, to do scans of the brain or something like that, or a blood test. But I still think measuring the pupil and its reaction after concussion is still probably going to be the best way to be objective about a concussion. And, eye doctors can get involved in that way. But, sports is becoming such a major part of American life, male and female, that eye doctors are going to get involved. So that's why I think we should, it's going to have to be young, energetic doctors taking up the mantle of bringing back the Sports Ophthalmology Society. But you don't necessarily have to be involved with a professional team to get involved. So I got involved with a few high schools in the area and just made myself open to seeing them. Actually, we do free exams for uninsured kids or underinsured kids the beginning of every year. But you can easily just extend something program like that and just go to a local school and say, hey, I'm an eye doctor in the area, and I would be up for screening your team. And again, I think you'll pick up more than you would think that you would pick up. You would think that these athletes have their vision all buttoned up because it's such an important part of them performing, but you'll realize that they've just been compensating for problems. To see a professional athlete and know that they could be corrected to 20/20, but they've been playing their sport at 20/60 their whole entire life, and you're just going, wow, why didn't anybody ever correct this, fix this, or do anything about it? And it's because nobody really extended themselves to get involved. And I know a lot of people are interested in kind of the science behind vision and sports, and this is a good natural outlet to get involved in that way, and then and to learn. And like I said, going to practices, even if you've never played sports, and I played sports my whole entire life, so I got an insight into the mentality of an athlete. But going to practices and just kind of seeing what they do and how do they prepare for a game, you can start seeing what's important to them, what's not important to them, and how you can fit in to help them prepare and get better at what they do. I'll give you another perfect example is knowing the mentality of an athlete. There's some athletes that are superstitious, like hyper superstitious. So you get somebody like Ichiro. Somebody gave him some Restasis for a little dry eye. He put it in his eye. He went 5 for 5 that game. And he has to have, after that game, he has to have his Restasis right at a certain time right before every game. And if he doesn't, he gets like freaked out. So he has his meal at a certain time. He has his batting practice at a certain time, a certain way, and then somehow Restasis crept into his superstitious routine before he gets out there. But then you realize there's a lot of athletes that are superstitious. So the guy that I was telling you about before, who's 20/60, he didn't want to change anything. And I go, look at your vision with these contacts and without, or with these glasses or without. Wow, this is like night and day. Okay, we're gonna get you in some contacts, or I can do a LASIK, or no. I've been doing this, for 28 years. I'm not changing now. And you're like, what? I mean, I don't know if this is gonna get you 4 points more. No. Completely superstitious. So you won't understand that, and you won't understand that mentality unless you get involved with them and understand them a little bit.
Yeah, myself, I played high school basketball, and I needed contacts just for driving at night or for small things like that. And I never played with my contacts in playing
Yeah.
basketball. Yeah.
See, so those are the things that you understand. But I always said to people, even if you didn't play sports, it's fun getting involved with teams, and a lot of times you become part of the family of these teams. A lot of my good friends are people that I met during my time taking care of athletes. And one of the perks when I started the Sports Ophthalmology Society is that every time there was an eye problem, ESPN would wind up calling me and asking for my opinion on whatever eye problem was going on. So, and I don't see that now because I see it all the time because, a player will have dry eye and the ESPN will do a story on it, or the papers will do a story on it, and there's nobody for them to go to and get a quote, because they always want a quote on these things. So they just kind of pick some random person. But it'd be great if we started this up again and they go, oh, such and such of the Sports Ophthalmology Society says that blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the story you mentioned about the boxer. I forget his name right now, but how he had cataract surgery, and New York law was preventing him from participating in this fight. And so you were part of that testimony and explaining that cataract surgery has evolved since then. And
Yeah,
I just thought it's
that was,
interesting how you can find an ophthalmologist on either side of the coin to argue your side.
yeah. And again, if you don't know sports, you don't have a idea of athletes, sports, and what can be done. That was a perfect blend of all of those things. The late Alan Crandall was the one who called me on that one. He said, "Hey, I got this boxer who I did cataract surgery on, and the New York Boxing Commission is saying that they won't let him box in this. It was a Cotto versus no, I'm blanking on his name, but there was a big fight at the time. They're not going to let him box because they have a law on their books that if you've had cataract surgery, but the law was created when it was a 8 millimeter incision extra cap cataract surgery. So we had to essentially present in front of the board. And first he asked me, he said, "What do you think? Can he box?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, how big was your incision?" He told me, I said, "Yeah, he can box." And so we went in front of the board, and so we got a law change that had been on the books for forever in terms of who can box and who can't box. And it kind of reminded me of one of the Rocky movies where Rocky goes in front of the board and said, "If I pass all your tests, who are you to say that I can't pursue my dream in life?" So that whole situation reminded me of that. And Alan and I had a great time presenting in front of that board and talking about it. And we brought him science, which was I brought him all these studies on small incision cataract surgery and what pound pressure that they could take and what was the pound pressure with a boxer, and sitting at the ring watching him just get pounded. And his eye was fine. He really got killed that fight. That eye was getting just pummeled. But Alan's cataract surgery was completely intact. There was no problem. The eye was like a normal eye, like we said it was. But some pretty tense moments.
So for the resident or early career ophthalmologist who wants to get involved in the treatment of athletes, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so if I were a resident and knowing what I know today, I would find out who's the team doctors. It's usually the hierarchy is there's an internist that kind of manages everything. Then there's the orthopod, and those two work together. And then there's the other specialist, but it turns out that eye trauma and eye problems happen more frequently than an ear thing or something else. So the internist and the orthopod can handle just 90% of the stuff that comes, but there's that 10% of things that happen frequently that is ophthalmology. And a lot of these teams don't have a team ophthalmologist. So if you're interested in getting into it, I would go up to the internist or the orthopod of the team and say, hey, I'm resident Joe Schmo, and I'm in this residency, and I'm interested in sports ophthalmology, and can I shadow you guys? And if you have any eye problems that come up, or if you need free eye exams or whatever, I'm available. And I think a lot of those doctors would be open to that. There's some legal things, maybe that you couldn't be their team doctor at that point, but you could be like a resident. Like these guys have residents that follow them around and that are part of the team. You could just be a resident, just following the team. That's the other thing I didn't really mention. There is a lot of legal stuff that goes on with the job, besides the increase in premiums of malpractice. But you are put in some really weird situations that you wouldn't normally be put in if you were just dealing with the normal population. When to play, when not to play, when to sit out. Is this a defect? Just like the player with the vision just in one eye. All these guys are retired now, so they've already made their money. So I'm not saying anything that's going to change their life. But you have this information, and who gets this information? So you're going to have that player sign a form saying that you can give the information over to these people. Whereas before, there was really there was nothing there written on how to handle a situation like that. So they said, hey, we're sending you Joe Blow, give us the information when you get it. Well, wait a second. I mean, I have laws in what I do. I can't just do that, or I can't just disclose to you what's going on here. You're going to have to get the player's permission for medical records. And then, you're dealing with a trainer, you're dealing with ownership, you're dealing with player, dealing with a lot of different things here that you do need some type of help and some type of standards to make these decisions. So, and that's why I think the organization has to be restarted, or we have to do that, because again, I'm sure there's eye doctors that are left flapping at the wind, and probably nothing has happened yet. But at some point, like I remember, I don't do LASIK anymore. I do SMA, but say you do LASIK on a player, and they have a trauma to their flap, so there's some doctors that would immediately say, well, that player shouldn't have had LASIK, right? Because there's a risk of trauma. But who's to say that? Nobody. I mean, it's not. But when you get an organization together, and then you get other doctors together, and you kind of say, well, this is what we feel about this, and these are our recommendations. So now you're a doctor taking care of a player in North Dakota. You have a rule and some standards that you can go by that will, if ever anything happens and it comes back to you, you can go, these are the standards that I followed. So that you're just not kind of left alone. And then it's the world we live in now. It's a attorney driven world, and you just have to really cover yourself. That's why a lot of doctors got out of it, because of that, because of those liabilities. But if you are going to do it, I would still, even with all that stuff, I would still say the the benefits to your the enjoyment that you get doing something like this, outweighs all of that. And it's definitely a different experience than what you're experiencing.
Yeah, real quick before we end up, what would you say is your favorite part of being a team ophthalmologist or being involved with sports ophthalmology?
And I tell this story is that you become an intricate part to the team. So, when you're on a team, you played, right? So when you're on a team, if you get a rebound, you feel like you've contributed to the team. There's nothing like that feeling. But in what we do, there's minor victories that you can say you have. And I talk about the time where we're in the playoffs and one of the players gets a scratch on his cornea and he was hot as heck. And we're going into the fourth quarter and he's come out of the game and he can't see. He's like, I can't play anymore. He comes in the training room and I said, let me take a look. He's got a cornea abrasion. I go, look, you want to play or what? He says, yeah, I want to play. I want to play. You get me on the court without me feeling like this. Yeah, I could put a contact lens in and you could play the rest of the game. Hardest contact lens, that I've ever had to put on somebody because it's like, like crying or whatever. But, he trusted me. You're part of the team. He's known you for a while. Get the contact lens in. He gets back in the game and hits the winning shot. And, you're getting high fives from everybody in the stadium because, you took this guy who couldn't play just 2 minutes ago and you got him back in the game and he hits the winning shot. So it's that being part of a team and achieving a goal, and you, in your own small little way, you help them achieve that team goal. So I always tell people, the life and times of a sports ophthalmologist. I gave the PG version. One of these days, I'll give the R-rated version. There's some crazy stuff that goes on in professional sports behind the scenes, and it's just head scratching. So you get a little bit of a window into a different world. We know our world of being a doctor and taking care of our patients, but the sports world, the entertainment world is completely different world. And, just getting a little glimpse of that, it's different. It's different than what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So it's just another experience in the world of experiences that you get as a doctor. And I wouldn't trade any of those experiences for anything. And like I said, some of my good friends to this day are, athletes, coaches, people involved in the organization that I worked with.
Well, Dr. Toyos, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you for listening to Sports Ophthalmology. To stay connected and learn more, you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, and at our website, sportsophthalmology.com.